The house carried that quiet kind of chill that only December brings, the soft cold that settles into corners even when the heater is on. I stood near the hallway watching Elena zip up her suitcase with motions that felt too quick, too mechanical, almost rehearsed. Her red scarf lay on the bed, untouched, even though she always wore it on winter trips. She didn't reach for it. She barely looked at it. Instead, she kept checking her phone, tapping the screen like she was waiting for a message she didn't want me to notice. She smiled at me in that small, thin way she had started doing recently, the sort of smile someone gives when they're trying to exit a conversation before it even starts. Christmas lights flickered softly behind her, casting a warm glow across her face, but even the warm light couldn't hide the distance in her eyes. It had been there for months now, this subtle drifting, this emotional quietness that felt like fog settling between us. I tried to ignore it, to blame it on work stress, on the season, on anything except what it really felt like. But standing in that dim hallway, I could feel it thick in the air, the space growing between two people who used to move like one. "You'll be okay for a few days, right?" she asked, adjusting her coat collar without meeting my eyes. "I always am," I said quietly, though I wasn't sure if it was true anymore. She nodded too quickly, as if relieved by the answer. Her suitcase wheels clicked softly against the floor as she pulled it toward the door. I saw her hesitate when she grabbed the handle, a pause barely a second long, like she was running through a checklist in her mind. Keys, wallet, phone, alibi. The thought hit me suddenly, sharp as cold air, but I pushed it away before it could settle. She said it was a girls' trip with her college friends, something they used to do before life became heavier. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her, but belief had become a fragile thing lately, something that cracked easily if held too tightly. She opened the door and the winter wind rushed in, sharp and biting. Her hair blew across her face and she tucked it behind her ear with a motion too soft, too slow for someone supposedly excited about a holiday getaway. I walked her to the car. She hugged me, but it was the kind of hug that felt like a memory of what hugs used to be. Stiff, polite, distant. When she pulled away, she didn't linger, didn't look back the way she used to before long trips. She just whispered, "I'll text you when I get there." And then she was gone, driving down the street, her taillights fading into the winter darkness. The house felt enormous the moment the door shut, empty in a way that wasn't physical, but emotional, like a space that suddenly remembered what was missing. I walked around slowly, letting the soft glow of Christmas lights fill the silence, but the silence didn't soften. It just grew heavier, settling like dust on every surface. The stockings still hung neatly by the fireplace. The ornaments on the tree shimmered as the heater kicked on. Everything looked warm, festive, gentle, everything except the inside of my chest. I made myself some tea, more for the comfort of holding something warm than for the taste. I sat near the window, watching snowflakes drift softly under the street lamp. I kept telling myself this was normal, that couples drift and reconnect, that the holidays make emotions complicated. But a part of me kept replaying small moments from the past months. Her late-night phone checks, her sudden weekend work commitments, the way she flinched when I asked if everything was all right. Tiny things, almost invisible on their own, but together they formed a pattern I had tried too hard not to see. As the night deepened, I told myself to sleep, to stop thinking, to let tomorrow be brighter. I turned off the lights except for the tree, its soft glow painting the room in gold. I started up the stairs, half exhausted, half hopeful that overthinking was my only crime. Then, just as my foot touched the second step, the doorbell rang. A sharp, sudden sound cutting through the stillness. I froze, heart thumping. No one visits unannounced this late, not on Christmas week, not when the world feels tucked into its own quiet routines. The bell rang again, softer this time, but urgent enough to quicken my breath. I walked slowly to the door, each step heavy with a strange, growing tension. I opened it, expecting maybe a neighbor, a delivery mix-up, anything ordinary. Instead, standing there in the cold glow of the porch light, was Maya, Elena's younger sister. Her coat dusted with snow, her eyes wide and trembling, like someone carrying a secret she could no longer hold. She clutched her phone tightly in her shaking hands. "Can I come in?" she whispered, voice barely steady. And just like that, Christmas didn't feel like Christmas anymore. It felt like the beginning of something breaking. The next morning, the house felt heavier than the night before, as if the walls themselves remembered the strange moment at the doorway when Emily almost said something but swallowed it at the last second. Daniel woke up earlier than usual, but not because he was rested, rather because sleep wouldn't stay with him. The winter light pushed through the curtains in soft, gray strokes, the kind of light that made everything appear colder, even the things that were supposed to feel warm. He lay still for a few seconds, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the heater and the distant sound of a neighbor scraping ice off their windshield. But what he was really listening for was something else, anything from Emily's room. A voice, footsteps, even the quiet rustle of bedsheets. Nothing came. He pushed himself out of bed, walked down the hallway, and paused outside her door. The silence behind it was too complete, too controlled, like someone was awake but pretending not to be. He wasn't sure why that thought hit him, but the feeling settled inside his chest with a weight he couldn't shake off. He forced himself to walk away, heading to the kitchen, where the coffee maker clicked to life with a familiar mechanical sigh. He stood there watching it drip, little by little, the way last night's unease had dripped into him until it pooled into something he didn't want to define yet. When Emily finally came out, she avoided his eyes, not aggressively, not guiltily, more like someone holding back a truth that didn't belong to her. She poured herself a small cup of coffee, though Daniel knew she never drank coffee in the morning. She stood by the counter, fingers wrapped too tightly around the mug, shoulders lifted as if she carried a secret across her back. He wanted to ask her again what she had come for, why she was here, what she was afraid to say. But the question stayed locked behind his teeth. The morning wasn't fragile, but Emily was. "I might stay one more night," she finally said, her voice small, almost rehearsed. "Jessica gets back tomorrow anyway." Daniel nodded, though nothing about the sentence made sense to him. Jessica wasn't supposed to return for 2 more days. He opened his mouth, closed it again, and then quietly said, "Yeah, stay as long as you want." Another silence followed, longer, heavier, different. Not the silence of comfort, the silence of someone waiting for the right moment to break. All day, Emily moved through the house like a shadow that didn't belong to the light. She cleaned dishes that were already clean, folded blankets that didn't need folding, paced between the living room and the hallway with a restlessness she didn't try to hide. Daniel pretended to read a book, though he hadn't turned a page in over an hour. His eyes kept drifting toward her, toward the way she would stop and scrunch her face like she was arguing with her own thoughts. Sometimes she took her phone out, stared at the screen, then put it back without unlocking it. Sometimes she opened her mouth to speak, but backed down halfway. By evening, the house felt like a place trapped between 2 heartbeats, waiting for the next one, fearing it wasn't coming. When dinner time came, Emily finally sat across from him, pushing her food around without eating. Her bracelet, Jessica's Christmas gift from last year, slid down her wrist with a soft, metallic clink. She stared at it as if it hurt her. Daniel watched quietly. There were moments in life when a person didn't need to hear words to understand that something was about to crumble. And tonight, that feeling filled the room so thickly he could taste it. Then Emily whispered, almost to herself, "I didn't come here to stay. I came here because Jessica doesn't want me alone right now." The sentence stabbed through the air in slow motion. Daniel set his fork down, but didn't move otherwise. "Why?" he asked, voice steady, but not calm. "Why would she think you shouldn't be alone?" Emily lifted her eyes, and for the first time since she arrived, he saw something raw, something scared, something carrying the weight of a decision that wasn't hers. "She told me not to tell you yet," she said. "But Daniel, something happened before she left, something she didn't want you to find out at Christmas." Her hands trembled, her voice cracked, and just like that, the silence between them wasn't silence anymore. It was the sound of a truth, preparing to break the world in half. Daniel didn't speak at first, not because he had nothing to say, but because his mind refused to move. Emily's words sat between them like a candle burning too close to the edge of the table. One wrong breath and everything would catch fire. He leaned back slowly, his heartbeat thudding against his ribs, steady but loud. The winter wind pressed against the windows, shaking them lightly, as if the outside world already knew something inside the house was about to break. Emily kept her eyes fixed on the table, tracing an invisible pattern with her fingertip. She looked like someone preparing to confess something she had no right to carry. The soft glow of the living room lamp turned her face pale, shadows forming under her eyes. She breathed in, breathed out, repeated. Then finally she said, "Before Jessica left, something happened between you two, and she didn't tell me the whole thing. She just told me it was bad enough that I needed to stay near you." Daniel shook his head slowly, disbelief tightening every muscle in his jaw. "Me and Jessica? Nothing happened. Nothing." Emily flinched, not because she didn't believe him, but because she wanted to. That difference stung him more than accusation. She folded her hands on her lap, fingers trembling in small, inconsistent waves. "Jessica said you two had a fight," she whispered. But the way she said it didn't sound normal. It didn't sound like the usual small argument. It sounded like something bigger, something she wasn't ready to explain to me yet. Daniel's throat dried. He tried to remember the last moments with his wife before she left for her Christmas trip. He remembered her packing late at night, her movements sharp and fast, her eyes refusing to meet his. He remembered asking if something was wrong, and her brushing it off with a brittle laugh. He remembered her hugging him too quickly and walking away as if she were late for something she didn't want to go to. But he didn't remember a fight, not the kind Emily was hinting at, not anything close to it. "Emily," he said softly, "Jessica and I didn't fight. She was distant, yes, quiet, but nothing happened." Emily looked up slowly, her expression filled with a kind of sadness that didn't belong to her. "Daniel, she said she left because she needed space from you, but not the normal kind of space. The kind where someone is afraid to talk about something, the kind where they don't want to face what they did." He blinked, stunned. "What she did?" Emily swallowed, her breathing uneven now. She brushed a strand of hair from her face, her shoulders folding inward like someone shielding themselves from a storm. "She told me she made a mistake, a huge mistake, and she didn't want you finding out until after Christmas." A cold weight sank into Daniel's stomach, heavy and merciless. His heartbeat slowed, not from calm, but from dread settling into his bones. "What mistake?" he asked, voice cracking for the first time. Emily didn't answer. Instead, she reached into the pocket of her hoodie and silently pulled out her phone. She unlocked it with shaking fingers, opened her messages, and handed the device to him across the table. "She told me not to show you," she whispered. "But I can't keep this to myself anymore. I can't just sit here knowing you're in the dark." Daniel hesitated before taking the phone. The screen glowed with a message thread, Jessica's name at the top. He scrolled slowly, each line tightening his chest further. The messages were fragmented, emotional, rushed. Words like mistake, regret, don't tell him, scared, not ready, fix this, kept appearing. Then one message stopped him cold. "I don't know how to tell Daniel. I don't know how he'll react when he finds out I wasn't alone that night." Daniel froze. His fingers locked around the phone. The air inside the room shifted, colder, thinner, harder to breathe. He felt a ringing start in his ears, soft at first, then louder, drowning out the sound of his own heartbeat. Emily whispered, "There's more." She reached into her small crossbody bag with trembling hands and pulled out an envelope, the same envelope she had held at the door 2 nights ago. She placed it on the table gently, as if it were explosive. "Jessica mailed this to me before she left," Emily said. "She told me to open it only if things got worse here, and I think they did. I think she knew something was coming." Daniel stared at the envelope. White, thin, unassuming. His name written on the front in Jessica's handwriting. His stomach twisted. "Why would she send you something for me?" he whispered. Emily shook her head helplessly. because she didn't trust herself to hand it to you, because whatever's inside, she couldn't face you with it. The room fell silent, not the soft silence of mourning, not the heavy silence of doubt. This was the silence right before a life changes forever. Daniel reached out, his hand trembling, his fingers brushing the edge of the envelope. He wasn't ready. He opened it anyway. The envelope felt too light for something carrying so much weight. Daniel turned it in his hands, once, twice, feeling the thin paper shift softly against his fingers. Inside, something slid from one corner to the other, a flat, fragile thing. A photo, maybe. A note. Something small enough to hide, big enough to destroy. Emily sat frozen across from him, hands clasped tightly, her breaths uneven. The room felt colder, the steady hum of the heater suddenly sounding distant, far away, as if the house itself was holding its breath along with them. Daniel finally tore the envelope open. The sound of ripping paper cut through the silence like a blade. Inside, there was a folded piece of letter paper and a small card, hotel key card size. His chest tightened. His fingers instinctively reached for the letter first. Jessica's handwriting, soft and slanted, covered the page from top to bottom. He recognized the way she curved her T's and the way her S's leaned slightly to the right. It felt wrong seeing familiar handwriting on a letter meant to reveal something he didn't want to know. He unfolded it slowly, eyes dragging over the first line. Daniel, if you're reading this, then I couldn't tell you myself. His throat tightened. He read the next line. This isn't how I planned Christmas. This isn't how anything was supposed to happen. Emily looked away, as if she'd read those lines too many times already. Daniel continued. I made a mistake I can't undo. I shouldn't have let things get so far. I shouldn't have trusted someone I barely knew. But I needed to feel like myself again, even if it was wrong. His fingers went numb. His heartbeat stumbled. He read the next part in a slow, cracking rhythm. It was one night, the night I told you I was working late. I wasn't. Daniel's jaw tightened so hard his teeth ached. The memory hit him. Jessica coming home around midnight, smelling like cold air and perfume. Not hers. He had asked if she was okay, and she'd brushed him off with a tired smile. The feeling he had ignored that night now returned like a punch to the chest. I didn't plan it. I didn't think it through. I didn't think at all. Daniel forced himself to keep reading, though his hands shook. I met someone. Not someone close. Not someone important. Someone I shouldn't have even talked to twice. His stomach twisted. Emily wiped her eyes silently. The room felt tilted, unstable. Then came the line that made the world blur for a moment. I wasn't alone that night, Daniel, and I regret it every second. He stopped. He couldn't breathe for a few seconds. The words sat heavy, suffocating, echoing everything he feared but hadn't dared to imagine. He lowered the page, staring blankly at the wall across from him, his vision unfocused. The lamplight flickered slightly, shadows trembling on the floor. Emily whispered, There's more. Finish it. He lifted the letter again with trembling hands. I didn't want to tell you before Christmas. I didn't want to break everything while we were already falling apart. I'm scared, not of you, but of what this truth will do to us. Daniel swallowed hard. He felt something inside him fracture, not loud, not violent, but deep. A quiet break that hurt more than any shout could. The next paragraph was shorter, shakier. I don't love him. I don't even know him. It wasn't about him. It was about feeling invisible, unwanted, wrong, I know, but I didn't know how to handle what I was feeling. Daniel let out a slow, painful breath, the kind that came from somewhere heavy inside the chest, because he remembered how distant she had been, how quiet, how tired. He remembered thinking something was off and choosing not to push. He thought giving her space was helping, but maybe space was exactly where she'd gotten lost. At the bottom of the letter, one last line waited for him. If you want to talk, you can. If you want to walk away, I understand. I deserve whatever you decide. He stared at that line until the letters blurred. His hand shook as he finally folded the letter back together, setting it on the table like it was something fragile. Emily's voice broke the stillness. Daniel, There's the card. His gaze moved to the small rectangle beside the letter, a hotel key card with the name of a downtown hotel printed in gold, the date inked faintly on the back. The night she said she was working late. Daniel's fingers hovered over it but didn't touch. He didn't want to feel the cold plastic. He didn't want proof of a night he wasn't supposed to know about. Jessica sent it as evidence, Emily whispered. She said she wanted to give you the truth, even if it hurt. Daniel leaned back slowly, breathing through the tightness in his chest. He felt the room spin, not violently, but in a slow, tilting way that made him feel like he wasn't standing on the same floor anymore. Finally, he whispered, "Why would she give this to you and not to me?" Emily's eyes softened with something like fear and sadness mixed together. "Because she trusted me not to let you fall apart alone." Daniel didn't answer. He couldn't, because in that moment, with the letter open, the card untouched, and Christmas lights flickering outside the window, he realized something devastating. The truth didn't just arrive. It had been waiting, quietly, painfully, for him to unwrap it. Daniel didn't move for a long time. The letter sat on the table like a wound still bleeding, and the hotel keycard beside it looked small enough to ignore, but powerful enough to ruin any trace of peace left inside him. Emily watched him quietly, her expression torn between sympathy and guilt. Guilt for being the messenger of something she never wanted to carry. The Christmas lights outside blinked softly through the window, casting faint colors across the living room walls. They looked too cheerful for a night like this, too alive for something that felt like the end of a marriage. Daniel finally stood up, his legs stiff, his breath shaky. He walked to the window and leaned both hands against the cold glass. The street was quiet, the houses wrapped in holiday warmth he suddenly felt miles away from. He could almost see his own reflection staring back at him, eyes tired, shoulders heavy, face pale under the winter light. He didn't feel like himself. He felt like a version of himself, watching everything fall apart from the outside. Emily spoke softly behind him. "Daniel, I didn't want to show you, I swear. But I couldn't hold it anymore, not when you kept asking what was wrong." He nodded slowly but didn't turn around. "It's not your fault. You didn't cause this." She let out a shaky breath, her voice trembling when she answered. "It feels like I did." He closed his eyes. "No, Jessica caused this. Or whatever she got herself into." That conclusion tasted bitter, heavy, wrong. But it was all he had. He turned back toward the table, staring at the letter again. The words "I wasn't alone that night" echoed in his head in a loop he couldn't silence. Every memory of Jessica suddenly felt different. Every laugh, every argument, every moment when she looked at him like she was hiding something behind her eyes. The truth twisted all of them. He didn't know if he wanted the full truth anymore. The truth hurt. The truth felt like a blade. Emily stood up slowly and approached him. "Daniel, she's still your wife. You deserve to talk to her, to hear the rest." He let out a broken, humorless laugh. "She left, ran off for Christmas, with a letter instead of a conversation." Emily swallowed. "She didn't run off with someone. She went alone." "Did she?" Daniel asked quietly. Emily opened her mouth, then closed it again. She didn't have an answer. The silence stretched until it became heavy enough to reshape the room. Then Daniel reached for the hotel key card. His fingers brushed the cold plastic, and a sharp wave of nausea rolled through him. This card was proof, not a rumor, not a misunderstanding, not a fear. Proof. He didn't know if he hated it or needed it. Before he could decide, Emily's phone buzzed loudly on the table, the vibration sharp enough to make both of them flinch. She grabbed it quickly, looked at the screen, and froze. Her eyes widened, her breath caught. "It's Jessica," she whispered. Daniel's stomach clenched. Emily hesitated, then slowly slid her thumb across the screen to answer. She put the phone on speaker, holding it carefully like it might break. "Jess?" she said quietly. There was a pause, a long one, filled with static and uneven breathing. Then Jessica's voice finally came through, soft, ragged, terrified. "Emily, is he there?" Daniel's heart dropped in his chest. The sound of Jessica's voice, shaking, exhausted, different, cut through him more sharply than the letter had. Emily looked at him helplessly. He nodded. "I'm here," he whispered. Another long silence followed. They could hear Jessica swallow, hear her unsteady breathing, hear how scared she was. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. "Daniel, please listen before you say anything. Please." He closed his eyes. "I read your letter." A broken inhale came from the speaker. "I know. I knew you would. I'm so sorry. I'm so, so sorry." "Who was he?" Daniel asked, trying to keep his voice steady, failing. Jessica let out a trembling exhale. "Daniel, it wasn't like that." "It looks exactly like that," he snapped softly, holding up the hotel card even though she couldn't see it. Emily flinched at his tone. Jessica's voice dropped to a whisper. "I wasn't there for what you think. I wasn't with someone. I wasn't cheating." Daniel stared at the letter on the table, confusion and pain twisting tighter. "You wrote that you weren't alone." "I wasn't," she choked out. "But it wasn't a man. Daniel, it wasn't anyone like that. I wasn't doing anything romantic, I swear to you." Emily's brows furrowed. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. "Then who?" he demanded. Jessica's answer came slowly, broken, heavy. "That night, I was with someone because I was helping them. I needed a safe place to hide them. They were in trouble. I couldn't tell you because I was scared you'd get dragged into something dangerous." Daniel blinked slowly, stunned. "Dangerous? What are you talking about?" Jessica's breathing turned frantic. "Daniel, I can't explain everything yet, but the person I was with is missing now. And I think someone followed me before I left for the trip. I think—" The call suddenly crackled loudly, cutting her voice in half. "Jessica?" Emily said sharply. "Jess? Jess, are you there?" Static filled the line. A faint thud, a gasp, then nothing. The call disconnected. Emily stared at the screen in shock. Daniel felt the floor drop from under him. Jessica's letter wasn't the whole truth. It was only the beginning of something much darker.